Roughly 9 minutes away from 10 o'clock. Time to talk technology. Only one question I think many of us are asking.
It is the year 2000, but where are the flying cars? I was promised flying cars. I don't see any flying cars. Why?
Mathew Dickerson, you might remember that ad campaign from 20 years ago, but the question still remains, where are the flying cars?
Where are the flying cars indeed? We've been promised it for so long and there have been so many different versions of it, but we might finally be getting a bit closer, and it's actually in the local area, Nick, that makes it really interesting.
It is amazing. We've been talking about this out at Narromine. We had a bit of a chat to the Deputy Premier earlier in the show about sort of the funding that's gone into it, but I wanted to talk the technology with you because a couple of people have called in to let me know that when I say flying cars, I may not be entirely accurate.
Not quite. They're not the image that we have where you just park your car in the garage, pull it out and off you go magically. But I was actually lucky enough, it was a complete random seating position that I had, but I was on a plane about 6 months ago and we can still fly around a little bit. And one of the engineers that was coming out to do some preliminary work on this particular project. So I had a great chat to him, and of course I was sworn to secrecy then, but now it's out in the media, I'm allowed to have a chat about it. But the great part about this particular bit of technology is they're combining the best of both worlds. So if you look at something like a drone or a helicopter, it can lift up vertically from anywhere. So it can land on the top of a building, or it can land in a park that's got a little bit of room around it, and that's fantastic. But a lot of the energy then, when that particular helicopter or drone is in flight, a lot of the energy is in going towards keeping the device up in the air, and then a little bit of it goes towards propelling it forward. So you find that obviously a helicopter can't travel as fast as a fixed-wing aircraft. Fixed-wing aircraft, of course, need a long runway to get up to speed to both take off and land. This particular bit of technology has got the best of both worlds. It actually uses 8 propellers and lifts off like a drone, and then once it gets up off the air and starts moving forward like a drone would, it actually has fixed wings that actually start to angle forward. So as it starts forward flight, the actual wings are keeping it up off the ground, and then they can use the propellers for forward motion. So it gets the best of both worlds in terms of vertical takeoff and landing, but also reasonable speed. So 300 kilometres an hour they're talking about it flying at, which allows it with not a huge amount of energy used to go from A to B in our region fairly easily.
That is really interesting, because here's what we keep hearing is that this is, when I think of this sort of technology, I imagine it being used in a city to avoid traffic jams. But one of the things the Deputy Premier said this morning was that it's actually great for regional areas and could be helping kind of bridge the gaps for towns that don't have airports.
Yeah, absolutely right. And that's exactly the point. No airport or even the convenience of getting into somewhere central. And so the sort of things I started thinking about were things like a taxi service, a short jump taxi service, for example, but getting people there quickly. Sometimes people need to go somewhere and they might want to spend an hour there, but if you've got to go to Burke, it's a 4-hour drive to go there for an hour. So suddenly you open up opportunities there. But I also saw medical options there. We've got the Royal Flying Doctor Service for emergencies, but if it was just something like blood tests that you might need to have transported from A to B, or you just needed a consultation where it wasn't an emergency, this sort of transport can make it fairly attractive in terms of the cost of it and the speed of it. I think that's the big thing. Use the resources we've got in the best possible way. Use humans in the best possible way. Don't leave them hanging around an airport, going through and taking off and all that sort of process. The other part of it is, if you think about something like COVID-19, we want to keep people away from each other as much as possible. So rather than going to a busy airport and taking off to get to some other location, having somewhere that you might be able to take off from that, and I'm not talking about your backyard, but there could be a park or an oval nearby, and there'd have to be designated spots for it to land and take off, but having those facilities nearby that you could take off, and then you've got to go to a meeting in Parramatta, for example, it might be a building in Parramatta you could land on the top of. So again, you're not having to land at Bankstown or land out at Mascot and then get transport in with all those people around. You're going right to where you needed to be. So I did love the technology when I chatted to the guy, and I thought, I hope at some stage in the future I'll be able to talk about this and see it in action, and it looks like absolutely we're able to see it in action. It is very exciting, but it's a great concept as well. All the delivery, the takeoff and landing delivery items we've seen so far have all relied on that drone technology where the propellers are keeping it up and propelling it forward. But this is the first one I've seen that's different to that.
I want to just talk a little bit about what it means in terms of passengers, because I think often we talk about these as being a bit like drones, and maybe it makes us think of something quite small, but we are talking about something that can carry, I understand, up to 6 passengers.
Yeah, 6 passengers. I assume there's someone driving it in there as well, so I'm not sure they're fully autonomous yet. That's something that probably will come down the track. But yeah, 6 passengers in there, so it is like a small car, and in terms of the number of people that can fit and that physical sort of size of it, if you like. So when you think about the propellers, there'll be propellers that are smaller than you might fly in a flight from Dubbo to Sydney, for example, but not a lot smaller than that. And again, you've got 8 of them on there, so there's a fair bit of mass in terms of the sides of it there, and they're sticking out the sides on the fixed wings, and then those fixed wings angle as it starts to fly forward, so they actually change their trajectory and change the propeller's trajectory as well. So that's where I had a great chat to that gentleman about that whole process of changing the whole angle of the wings, which I thought sounded fairly complicated, and thought there seems like a fairly, maybe a point of failure there. But when I had a chat to the gentleman, it sounded like it was actually all fairly simple, and really didn't mean there was a huge area where they could fail, because the whole wing was moving in terms of that twisting motion to move it forward. So, and that took the propellers with it. So yeah, look, it sounded pretty cool.
Oh, that is really cool. Now, look, the other thing that interested me was, we're talking about an electric vehicle. What sort of range do you think something like this could have? And I know your experience with electric cars probably gives you quite a bit of insight into that.
Yeah, and I don't know, Nick, I am sorry, I don't have enough information on these devices to say the range, but the range, and I am guessing, I'm sure you'll get someone from the company on at some point and have a chat to them, but the range in my mind would be probably that 300 kilometre range would be the sweet spot for them. They can travel at 300 kilometres an hour, getting that hour sort of flight time, that'd be where I think their sweet spot would be. The challenge, of course, always with this is that you put more batteries in something so it can last longer, and then it gets heavier, so then it doesn't last as long, so you put more batteries in and away you go. So you're trying to find that sweet spot of what range do I want, what's practical for people, and then how much is in terms of losing in the range because of the weight that I've got to carry. A car has a huge advantage in that it's not trying to get all that weight up in the air, it's only got to move it along the ground. So it's a little bit different when you start to come to flying vehicles and the weight's imposed on the actual overall vehicle itself.
Look, testing is kicking off next year. We will learn a lot more about it. We are very excited about it. And, of course, the formal announcement later today. We're kind of running out of time, but you touched on the idea that, we could be heading towards autonomous vehicles even when they're flying. Just really quickly, we've actually got a driverless bus in Newcastle now.
Yeah, look, and I think of the Newcastle song, Nick, and I think about Hunter Street and these people with these very hotted up cars, and then we've now got an autonomous bus that's going in a certain route. It's a 3-month trial that's running. It started at the beginning of the holidays, and look, I think the idea is great. The feedback already from people, it's only been going a few days, has been they're very confident and comfortable with it. There is someone sitting in there, but they can't drive it. It's not, they haven't got controls in there. They're probably sitting in there just to make people feel comfortable. There's an emergency stop button as well, of course, but it's doing a set route around Newcastle, and I think in general it'll just start to get people a little bit more comfortable with the idea of autonomous vehicles of some description.
Mathew Dickerson, we'll talk again soon, but thanks for your insights today.
Thanks, Nick.